Babu Justice, I watched you when you were handing over your daughter. It was special. It was very special. And they look good. Yes. They look good. Please don't be jealous. They look good. They look good. They look stunning. Yeah, they look stunning. I've been tasked to do this part of the service, and it's always good to watch. I notice many of you are sitting with your spouses, and I'm curious to know how many of you, how many years have you been married with the person that you're sitting next to you. But I don't want to fall into the temptation of asking if you were given a chance to do it again. I don't want to take that risk, but I just want to check the stats. Let me not go to the repeat of the whole thing. But it would be good to do it again. I've been married with this lady for 30 years. 30 years. And if you were to ask me if I could do it again, I don't even think twice. I can do it again. Can do it. And I think most of you, I represent most of you. Now, if we have those that are thinking of leaving, please stay. Please stay. We can fix these things. We can work out a solution, We can work out a solution. Marriage comes from God. It's not our human thing. It was designed and created and initiated by God. It's not a human device. It was started by God. And the first couple that got married was Adam and Eve. And God, the creator of that couple, was the one giving over the daughter and also receiving the couple. And more so, he had created the couple. So if someone asked, who's giving this daughter? Actually, God himself asked that question. And he raised his hand, he said, I do. Because he initiated the whole thing. I want to share with you some few verses from the Bible. And I will be speaking on the topic on roles in marriage. Not as we are familiar with. I think we have imposed roles. And many times we say these roles come from the Bible. But I want us to look at the roles as described by the scriptures. Not as imposed by our cultures, And sometimes because we live in our cultures, we think this comes from the scriptures, when actually it comes from us. It comes from our environment. It comes from our societies. I want to read the verse that we're familiar with, the book of Ephesians, the letter to the Ephesian church. The writer is Paul. He writes to the husbands. Now, let me give a background. He's not giving these instructions because the church in Ephesus had family problems or marital problems. Are we moving together? He's not giving these instructions. He's saying, if you read Ephesians chapter 5, 25, 26, and 27, he says, husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. Now, before I proceed, I'm going to read verse 26 and 27. Now, Paul knew that if he had written, husbands, love your wives, and full stop, and not give how this should happen, we would pull from our cultures and say, well, he said I should love my wife. How do I love let me check how my father loved his wife. And let me check how the neighbors, how the society. Because Christ knew that we're going to do that, he said, I don't want to leave this to chance. I will prescribe. I will describe and prescribe. Here's a prescription. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her. So that you don't fall into temptation of looking into culture. Look at Christ as the model husband, how he loved his church. And it says he loved his church and gave himself. Normally we give a lobola. I I don't want to mention how much I gave for my wife. Back then it was a lot, but if you look at it through the eyes of today, you might be tempted to think that it was a bargain. It wasn't. Back then I was earning, I started in the work as a pastor. I was earning 287. Now from 287, I needed to pay rent, to buy my food, and also to pay part of her education from that 287. Now I will not give you a breakdown. But in 2 years' time, I was able to raise what was required as lobola, and I gave that part. But now Christ is saying he did not give the lobola for his church. He gave himself. I think this is the ultimate gift, when you don't give your possession, but you give yourself. Normally we give from what we have, and we can give to others also. But the role model says, give yourself. Because if you have given yourself, then you can't hurt yourself. You will treat her as you treat yourself. But if you have given something, and you keep on reminding the family that I gave this, and you'll be tempted to do things. Now, verse 26 says, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having a spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. Now Christ is saying to men, give yourselves to your wives, just like I gave myself to my church at the cross. Now, the context here is salvation. Christ was saving the church. And he brings that cross teaching, that salvation teaching, he brings it within the context of marriage. He says, I no longer want you to love your wives the way your culture dictates, but I want you to look at the cross and look at and observe the way I love my church. And once you have seen that, I want you to repeat that example. Now, there is another verse that is found in First Peter 3, verse 14, where Peter says, husbands, love your wives, because they are as weaker vessels. Now, we have abused that text, and we have defined our wives as weaker vessels. But the text says, love them as you would cherish a vessel. They are not a vessel, but the loving. Love them the way you would cherish an expensive vessel. They are not a vessel. Now we know that our wives are not weak. They are not a weaker vessel. I think we have read much into that text. It's the example. When you treat her as you would treat a vessel that is valuable, but that can break. They cannot break, they are not the vessel, but they treat them as you would treat a vessel. And many times we have labeled them vessels. Women are weaker vessels. But I promise you, watch them. Oh, let me put it this way. A home is a home because there is a woman. When I say I'm going home, I'm not going to a house. I'm going to a home. And what defines the home? It's not the walls, but the one who's there. My mother passed away early this year. And the house is still there, but the home is no more there. We no longer go there. The house is still standing. So a home is not a house. It's a person. Now, look at it the other way around. If the mother is no more there, there is the father. It's no longer a home. And fathers are afraid to live in a house that has no home. They correct the mistake and go and look for another home and impose a home to their children while the children are still dealing with the other home that has just departed. Then the father, because he cannot, maybe I shouldn't go there. But mothers are a home. They are a home. Fathers are not. If you don't believe me, just watch Emzini Wensizwa, where you have men living in that environment, and compare it with a place where only ladies live. Very much different. Emzini Wensizwa, there's a bicycle hanging. Someone is doing this, someone is doing that in the same room. Why? Because it's not a home, it's a house. Just a dwelling place. But once you put in an element of a woman, then it becomes a home. It becomes a home. Now, Paul did not leave it there. He also spoke to women. He said in chapter 5, verse 22, wives, submit to your own husbands as to the Lord. Now, verse 23 says, for the husband is the head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church, and he is the savior of the body. Therefore, verse 24, just as the church is subject to Christ, so let the wives be to their own husbands in everything. Now, here's Paul is putting a context. Many times we like to use the word, you must submit. But the context is, submit to a person who can die for you. Submit the way the church submits to Jesus Christ. There's a context to it. And many times we impose submission without the conditions. The conditions are prescribed and described in this passage. So what are the conditions? The wife must submit to the husband as to the Lord. And for the husband as head of the wife, as also Christ is the head of the church. Now what is this passage saying? It is saying the wives should respond to the husband. Now I want to use that word to submit. It's actually a response. It's not an instruction. It's a response. If he can die for you like Christ died for his church, then it is safe, very safe, to respond. And it is very safe to submit. But if the conditions are not conducive, watch out. If he loves you not in a Christ-like manner, then the conditions are not conducive to submit. If you dare to submit, woe unto you. Check the conditions first, according to this passage. Now, there is a passage that I want to read to you, Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. Beautiful passage. When God gave the man Adam, when he gave him a wife, chapter 2, Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. I'm going to read that passage to you. Now my Bible is misbehaving. I usually turn this passage. Okay, I found it. It says in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18, and the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Then verse 19 mentions that God created animals, this and that. Then verse 21, it says, then God caused a deep sleep upon Adam, and he slept. And while he was sleeping, God created Eve from a rib. The rib that he got from Adam. And Adam woke up and he saw this beauty in front of him. Now, God did not want Adam to participate in the creation of Eve. He wanted Adam to receive Eve as a gift. That is very important. If your spouse is a gift from God, then you can't mess up with a gift because you will have to account to the giver. But if you don't look at her as a gift, that you got her from somewhere, you have quite an interesting places where people find their spouses. If you ask, where did you get? No, we were jiving, we were dancing. Quite an interesting place to find a spouse. I'm not saying that is wrong, but it's quite interesting in relation to this. But it is better to receive your spouse from God. She or he must come as an answer to a prayer. Verse 18 says, and the Lord said, it is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper comparable to him. A helper. I will make him a helper comparable to him. Now, many times we have misunderstood that term, a helper. We have imposed on this passage the meaning of a helper the way we understand it today. You know, we have helpers in our homes. And we think that this is what God intended, that Eve was to be a helper. But this is a different helper, different from the one that we have in our homes. Are we moving together? The helper that was intended here is different from the helpers that we know. Actually, God is also described as a helper. I think you are aware of that passage in Psalms 121, where David is asking a question. Where is my help coming from? He's using the same word when he says that. Where does my help come from? Psalms 121, verse 1 and 2. I will lift up my eyes to the hills. From whence comes my help? There's that word. The same word that has been used in Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. It's a Hebrew word which is ezer. It means to help. Now, of interest, God is also using the same word, or David is using the same word in relation to God. I will lift up my eyes to the hills, from whence comes my help, that word. Then he says, my help comes from the Lord, so that the Lord is a helper. So that the help that is provided in Genesis, provided by the woman, is the same help that God provides for his children. Now, I ask you, is this a weaker vessel? If she does what God does, then we need to relook at our definition of a helper in relation to this. When God created a woman, a wife, she created a blessing for men. He created a blessing for men. Now listen to this passage. It says, my help comes from the Lord who made heaven and earth. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. Now this is the helper, which is God. Behold, he who keeps Israel shall neither slumber nor sleep. He is a helper. The same word that has been used in Genesis. And if we start looking at our spouses from the way the Bible prescribes and from the way it is described, then we will change our view of them. We will change. We will not ask her, ufigile. We will not say to her, ubekezele. For what for? What for? Kanti uzohlutshwa ubani? Who's going to be troubling this kid? Dexter, I don't think he looks stunning to do that. And if you are thinking of it, you saw him. And if you are thinking of it, I saw your dad. And he doesn't look like we could encourage her to ubegezela. I think we should stop preaching that gospel because we are actually making abuse legitimate. When we tell our little girls, ubekezele, why? Is umkhwenyana uzomhlupha? we are no longer preaching that gospel. We are saying, Dexter, love her. Now there's a copy Christ, the way he loved his church. Actually, the word love in husbands, love your wives, it's agape. The same word that has been used in John 3:16. For God so loved the world, and he gave his begotten son. Same word. So he's saying, Christ is saying, God gave me, now I want the husbands to give themselves for their wives. Once you have done that, submission will be a response. Actually, it is easier to submit than to die at the cross. If I were to be asked to choose whether I want to submit or to go to the cross, going to the cross is difficult because you give your life. You go there, you don't come back. But submission, you are still there. Which one is easier? And many times we choose the easiest one. Husbands, let's love. Comrades, let's love our wives. The world today is so cruel. So cruel. Now, the government has come up with laws to protect women. Protect women against who? Protect little girls against who? Comrades, I think we need to do better. We need to go back to the basics. We need to be Christ-like. Why do we have homeless kids? Why are they running away from? Are they running away from their mothers? Many times they're not running away from the mother. They're running away from comrades. Many times. I want to appeal to us. Let's love our women in a Christ-like fashion. We now have a role model, Jesus Christ. And once we have done that, we would have created an environment where they will submit without asking any question. Actually, it will be a response, not an instruction. And let's do away with this thing of telling our little girls. And it happens many times, even in the reception. It's going to be difficult. Why is it going to be difficult? These people love one another. Why should it be difficult? Aren't they going to be working at it? And many times we don't speak to our boys. We speak to the girls. We don't teach them to be loving. Please love your wives. I think we need to change the gospel and stop saying persevere. Start saying love your wife. As Christ loved the church. So we're not going to use culture to love our wives because culture will mislead us. We will use Christ. Because he does not only give gifts, but he gives himself to his church. May God bless you. May God bless you as you start this journey. And we're going to be supporting you. We're going to be praying for you. And I believe your parents are going to be supporting you. And I see both families are here. Please don't look at it as profit and loss. This is not a transaction. I know there was a money transaction. Babu Dube, you have gained a son. It's not a loss. You have not lost to Fikile. And none you have gained a daughter. Amen. Did not lose a son. Amen. And let's hold the hands together and support this family. And it's good to see Ubabumoyo. And it's good to see Nyubiza Justice. Justice ahleli no shop. Please keep it that way. Keep it that way. And let's support this lovely couple. This is their first week. We've been in this thing for quite some time. You have been in this thing for quite some time. And it can be done. Yeah. It can be done. Is it easy? If you're not working at it, it's not easy if you're not working at it. It's easier to get a marriage certificate than to get a driver's license. You know, the pastor simply asks you, do you love this? And you say, I do. You don't have to write an exam. Even if you don't, you still say, I do. I usually do counseling for couples, and I don't want any couple to go through a marital relationship without counseling. Now there was a disfavor that was done to us and Dudu, you know. The pastor 30 years back, who was supposed to have counseled us, he said, you're getting married to a pastor. I don't need to counsel you. and Dudu is a survivor. Because she had to deal with a man who was not counseled. But she's still here. She's still here. Counseling does not guarantee that there will not be problems, but it guarantees that at least they will find solutions. Someone would have told them about solutions. But if you go there and hope that the love that you have will address, because you know we love one another, but we still need to pay rent, we still need to work, we still need to wash the dishes, and we still need to do many things. We need someone to hold us by the hand and walk us from childhood to adulthood, so that at least we have better families, we have better churches, and we have better societies. Is there a pastor who's in the house? I know there is Babu Dube. I'm going to ask you, sir, to come up front. I want us to pray for this couple. And I also want us to pray for the couples that are seated here. Babu Dube, I would want you to join us. I would like you to join us. We will be praying for Dexter Nofikile, so that the Lord should keep them and sustain them as they take this journey, so that we support them, we keep them together, so that God becomes the third party in this marriage.